Welcome to the Sliver and Bite podcast, where we explore everything food, how to cook it, and even how to grow it. Today we're talking French chocolate mousse, or mousse au chocolat. And for those that don't know, mousse translates to foam in French. Let's get straight into the when, where, and why. Now, there's more to it than just going, chocolate mousse was invented on this day or this century. It was very popular in the early 1900s, and that's where it started to hit its stride. And when you think about it, that's only 100 years ago. In the 1700s, that was the beginning of aerating savoury techniques. And it wasn't until the 1800s where they started putting things like chocolate into the savoury mixes. And whilst they were putting chocolate into the savoury foams, it wasn't quite a dessert just yet. It wasn't until the mid-1900s where it was labelled a dessert. As for the where, Montmartre, France is reportedly where it was created, and it was said to be created by a French artist, Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. And the pieces of the puzzle do come together, because it was the late 1800s where the chocolate was put into the foam, and it was said to be Toulouse that was the one that did it. Now, there is no other record of a chef that was said to have created the dessert, so this is what we're landing on. And as for the why, I guess it's down to the evolution of food and experimentation. Toulouse was into fine food just as much as he was a painter, so the two sort of go hand in hand, being a bohemian artist. And just before we get into the ingredients and the method, I just want to put into perspective how young chocolate mousse is, because we're only talking a couple of 100 years, 200 years that chocolate mousse, as we know it, has been around. When you think of something such as baklava, that is a 6,000-year-old recipe. It's just, the mind boggles when you think about that. And some desserts and some foods are relatively new to us. And one last thing before we move on. It was developed from the earlier mayonnaise de chocolat. When you think about it, there's plenty of recipes out there that say you can use mayonnaise if you don't have butter and oil, because that's what mayonnaise is made of. So I found that incredibly interesting, and also goes within the theme of it beginning from a savoury technique. Okay, let's get into the ingredients. So the original and authentic ingredients are egg whites, dark chocolate, and sugar. Sometimes you would put butter in, and that would provide the glossy finish. And as it evolved, and the more modern ingredients, you have egg whites, the egg yolks, the dark chocolate, cream, butter, and optional sugar. So really, the evolution of it would definitely be the method. However, the egg yolks were added to make more of a custard-like texture. Let's head into the method. Now, it doesn't take a great deal of talent to create this dessert. You don't need to be a patissier. What you do need is patience and to have a clear mind about what you're doing. And as I explain the method steps, you'll understand why. First off, ahead of everything, you need to break up your 70% dark chocolate and place into a bowl with your butter. You can microwave it in 20 to 30 second bursts until it's melted. I like to do it over a bain-marie, over a water bath. You want to continuously stir it just to make sure that it is melting evenly, and make sure you're getting the sides of the bowl because you don't want that to solidify. You want to make sure all of the chocolate is incorporated. Once that's done, you can take off the heat, and it's best to put it on a suspended trivet. Just allows it to cool down a little bit faster. So now there's a little bit of a waiting game. You'll be waiting roughly 30 minutes, obviously, depends on how cold your kitchen is, because you need your chocolate to reach 35 degrees Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit, because obviously you're going to be putting this with whipped cream and raw egg, and we don't want to cook it. So as the French say, mise en place. Everything in its place, so you can arrange the kitchen equipment ready to execute the rest of the method. If you're lucky enough to have two mixers, either a stand mixer or two hand mixers, that would be perfect, because you are going to whip your whipping cream, and you need to have separated your egg yolks from your egg whites, and then you will whip the air through the egg whites. You don't want to retrieve the eggs and the cream out of the fridge too soon though. So I would wait until the chocolate reaches 40 degrees Celsius and 104 degrees Fahrenheit before you take the cream out, measure it, put it into the mixer, and you separate your egg yolks. Egg yolks can go into a small bowl. The egg whites need to go into a larger bowl because obviously they quadruple in size when you whip it. So now that you have your egg yolks off to the side, you've whipped your cream, you have whipped your egg whites, you can sprinkle over the sugar over the egg whites and whip that into it. That will provide a bit more of a meringue and stabilize the egg whites. Not necessary though. It is definitely a little bit of taste that goes into it. However, you can omit the sugar and you've got more of a bitter, rich chocolate mousse once it's cooled. Now we can start mixing all of these components together. So with a spatula, a long spatula, because you don't want to put your hands into it with a smaller spatula. I've made that mistake before. You want to break up the egg yolks if they're still in their yolk form. Give it a little mix and pour over the cream. You will then stir that gently through the cream. You only want to do 5 or 6 turnovers and don't go over the same place twice. You want to incorporate as much as the egg yolks into the cream as quickly as possible, but as gently as possible. Now it is time to pour the cooled chocolate over the cream and egg yolk mixture. So pour that over. Doesn't matter if it goes straight into the center or you make it evenly distributed over the top of it. Then with the spatula, turn that over roughly 5 or 6 times again. You don't want to deflate the cream. And then you reach for your egg whites. You only want to put in a quarter or half of it at this point in time and incorporate the foam into the chocolate and cream mixture. If there was ever a time to be slow and gentle, now is the time. And the reason is because whipped egg whites are just a whole heap of bubbles. So if you vigorously turn this over, all you're doing is popping those bubbles. And what you run the risk of being left with is a sloppy mess, and even if it does set, it will be more of a custard than a light fluffy mousse. Now you can add in the rest of the egg whites, stir that through gently. You want to try and get rid of all of the egg whites. Basically, all you're doing is covering the egg whites with the chocolate mixture. Once that's dispersed through, you can either spoon it into some glasses or your desired vessel, or you could put it into a piping bag and gently pipe it. That will then go into the fridge, uncovered for 30 minutes. You just want to make sure that all of the heat has left the mousse because you don't want any additional moisture in there. You can then retrieve the vessels with the chocolate mousse in and cover them because you then don't want to have a firm film over the top of the mousse. Now, you would want the mousse chilling for at least 2 hours because you want it to set correctly. If you were to take a spoonful now, it would be quite loose and runny to the touch. You want it to firm up. And as for a garnish, you really can put whatever you want on the top of this because there's not a great deal that doesn't go with chocolate. My favorite here in Australia is a peppermint crisp. It's shards of peppermint with a chocolate covering. You crush that up in the candy bar wrapper and you put that over the top, or a flake, which is ribbons of set chocolate basically. Or you can use a potato peeler and peel off some dark chocolate to further enhance the richness of the dessert. And if you're looking for more of a showstopper, as you can see in the podcast picture tile, I have some Swiss buttercream piped on the top with some fresh fruit and a mint leaf. Do you know what? When I set out to do French chocolate mousse, I really did think it was going to be a short episode. However, here we are at 13 minutes. Now it's time for the tips. First tip is to either make the chocolate mousse the day before or the morning of, because you want it fresh, however you do want it set. And if you are preparing other dishes and going in and out of the fridge, that will affect the temperature obviously, and you may not have your French chocolate mousse set all the way through. If you do have a second fridge, that's great. Put it in there and leave it alone. My next tip is about the chocolate. You do want to go for a 70% dark chocolate. This is the optimal chocolate that you want to go for. And it is best to go for the baking chocolate. The baking chocolate actually has a more concentrated level of cocoa and little sugar and milk as fillers. What you'll end up with is a much richer and tastier dessert and less chance of the chocolate splitting because of the added sugar and dairy products. I've already mentioned this, but my next tip, sugar is optional. Yes, it does create a slightly smoother finish to the palate. However, if you're cooking for a more mature crowd, the richness is actually quite nice and it's a little more refreshing and less dense. Final 2 tips. Have all of your equipment ready to go. Once the chocolate cools, it is whip and stir, and you don't want to take your time. You want to make sure you initiate each of the stages, but then of course you're being gentle as you're doing it. You don't want to have to look for a spatula because you've poured the chocolate over. It's pour and gently stir. So it's all about timing. And in my experience, manually stirring the ingredients together is the way to go. The electrical appliances, they're a little too vigorous, even on their slow setting. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Sliver and Bite podcast. You can head to sliverandbite.com.au to check out this and so many other recipes. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. You can also head to YouTube and find me at Sliver and Bite TV, where you can find real-time cooking tutorials and cook along with me. And just remember, if I can cook it, you can cook it too.